get emotional, acting like a fool. I'm not talking about the one-night stand. I'm talking about being emotional and making a stupid decision, right? There are a lot of people who felt that the patriotic duty after 9/11 was to go join the army. Then they got shipped off to Baghdad. And they thought, I'm not fighting any terrorists here. Okay? So it can be serious, serious problems, all right? And, you know, over 4,000 American soldiers died in the war in Iraq. For what? The price of oil is higher than it's ever been. The Middle East is more unstable than it's ever been. At least Iraq is improving to some extent, but come on, it's not a paradise. I mean, there's not a single person in this country that would trade places with an Iraqi, would you? Even the president. I wouldn't trade places with the president of Iraq, because people were trying to kill that guy. Okay? If you've ever seen him talk, he's not very smart. Anyway, all right. Let me read the rest of this here, and then, like I said, we'll talk about what this means, what Baghdadi's talking about. The lesson repeated itself during my subsequent work as a reporter. The news media are not monolithic. So he's saying, look, it's not all the same thing. They are not frozen in a permanent set of standards, but they suffer from built-in biases that protect corporate power and consequently weaken the public's ability to understand forces that create the American scene. These biases in favor of the status quo, so the power structure, this is very much a conflict theory approach, like the ones operating during the Sacco-Vanzetti case, do not seem to change materially over time. When Senator Joseph McCarthy gained demagogic power, he did it as did A. Mitchell Palmer 30 years earlier with the enthusiastic support of most newspapers. The newspapers had to abandon discipline of documentation and critical judgment in order to promote McCarthy, but they did it. During the emergence of the Civil Rights Movement in the 1950s, most of the best regional papers in the North and the South would tell me when I dropped in for the traditional fill-in for outside journalists that there was no serious problem in their colored districts, quote unquote. Yet in city after city there came racial explosions that surprised even the local media. So one of the biases that he's talking about here is that there's certainly a racial bias in the media. There's no doubt about it. This became clear and apparent during Hurricane Katrina when they showed pictures of a white family stealing bread out of this grocery store and said they were liberating it, and a black family that was stealing bread who they said was looting it. And think about the comparisons that were made with third world countries when Katrina happened. Think about the pictures from the convention center and the Superdome. Right? Were those majority white faces? And they showed those faces. Of course they were in terrible conditions, right? They'd been there for days without food, without a change of clothes, without a shower. But they acted like these people were animals, right? Or that they were stupid for not getting out of New Orleans. Most of these people didn't own a car. You think it's their fault they can't make a living wage in this society? And again, take the civil rights example. Until the 1960s, even the northern liberal press didn't give one damn bit of concern about black protesters being attacked by dogs and hoses and being beaten and being hung and lynched. It didn't matter. Okay? And if you actually watch Channel 12 News, they're much more likely to report on African Americans or Latinos committing crimes than they are white people. Especially heinous crimes. And it's been shown, research after research, we'll talk about it when we get to cultivation theory, this has an impact. Not only on what non-minority people, white people in this country think of minorities, but what minorities think of themselves. And it's not just the news, is it? Who else portrays black and Latino people as criminals and bums and idiots?
Entertainment.
Yeah. The first African American who won an Academy Award was, I think her name is Hattie McDaniel. She played a basically slave in Gone with the Wind. Look at Halle Berry, right? She paid a broke. What was she working at a restaurant, right? And her husband was in jail when she won the Academy Award. What did Denzel Washington win his first Academy Award for? What role did he play? A good guy? He played a superhero? No, he played a crooked cop that made a white cop smoke PCP-laced weed in his car so he could frame him. Remember, if you do not smoke this, we have a problem. And I even remember that, I don't know if Denzel said something about it, but somebody said something. Like, how come white people could win it for Tom Cruise wins it for born on the 4th of July, right? Or something like that. Or Orson Welles, or one of these people. But for an African American to win an Academy Award, they have to play the Sambo role or something like that. Like, it reminds me of Driving Miss Daisy. That bothered the hell out of a lot of people, the way Morgan Freeman played that role. Okay? But again, and it occurs in the news. Alright? Going on. When I was reporting on structural poverty in the early 1960s, once again, in the newsrooms of some of the best papers, I was told that there was no significant problem. But a few years later, it was clear that not only was there a problem, but it existed for a long time. What he's suggesting is that newspapers tend to ignore certain issues. Yet if I asked these same papers about welfare cheaters, low-level political chicanery, or failings of almost any public agency, their libraries are full of clippings. There was, it appeared, a double standard, sensitive to failures in public bodies, but insensitive to equally important failures in the private sector, particularly in what affects the corporate world. There's very little newspaper articles that talk about where the bailout money went. And the person who was in charge, Elizabeth Warren, was asked if she knew where the money went in front of a congressional hearing, and she said, I don't know. And newspapers don't even investigate this stuff. Or the rating agency's behavior, or the behavior of the Department of the Treasury. They're all complicit. This institutional bias does more than merely protect the corporate system. It robs the public of a chance to understand the real world. So he's saying they're distorting reality. Our picture of reality does not burst upon us in one splendid revelation. It accumulates day by day and year by year in mostly unspectacular fragments from the world scene, produced mainly by the mass media. Our view of the real world is dynamic, cumulative, and self-correcting as long as there is a pattern of even-handedness in deciding which fragments are important. But when one important category of the fragment is filtered out, or included only vaguely, meaning selectively presented, our view of the social political world is deficient. The ultimate human intelligence, discernment of cause and effect, becomes damaged because it depends on knowledge of events and the order and significance in which they occur. When part of the linkage between cause and effect becomes obscure, the sources of our weakness and of our strength becomes uncertain. Errors are repeated decade after decade because something is missing in the perceptions by which we guide our social actions. My personal associations, professional experience, and research tell me that journalists, writers, artists, and producers are, as a body, capable of producing a picture of reality that, among other things, will signal weakness in the social order. But to express this very picture, they must work through mainstream institutions, and these institutions must be diverse. As the most important institutions in the production of our view of the real social world, newspapers, magazines, radios, television, books, whether online or print, increasingly become the property of the most persistent beneficiaries of mass media bias, it seems important to me to write about. Now, one of the things he's trying to suggest here is that there's a culture inside journalism, and in this section, we're going to talk about the media in a general perspective, meaning we're going to talk about television, the internet, we're going to talk about entertainment versus news, and what the functions are, and the differences, and what relations there are to them. But in this first section, we're mainly going to be talking about newspaper, or news agencies, whether it's online or whatever, or whether it's broadcast or print. And we need to look at this element of organizational culture. All journalists go through journalism school. Or at least a form of it, even if they're an apprentice. And they're told certain things about what drives stories. They don't call it sensationalism, but they say stuff like murder. Multiple murders are better than one murder. A kid or a child molestation case is better than just a child abuse case. Celebrity stories, if there's something weird going on like Charlie Sheen, are good stories. One scandal with one company is a good story, not the whole entire system falling apart. And what it's trying to suggest that inside the news agencies themselves is it an attempt, or at least a desire. Look, if you're a newspaper reporter, your goal is to write stories that are going to be printed. So you write a story about how Apple uses slave workers in China, and your editor goes, "I'm not publishing this. We have relationships with Apple. We don't know if this is true. Did you go to China to verify this story?" And whereas maybe on another story where it's the story about Tom Cruise's baby, and there's no verification, that one will get printed. or some unsubstantiated rumors about some other issue, or maybe the Obama campaign, or what Mitt Romney's doing. But when it comes to something that criticizes the capitalist system, that criticizes the corporate overlords that control the media and its content, or makes a company that the news agency has a relationship look bad, the news editors and the news journalists know instinctively not to report on these things. It isn't like the editor doesn't go and sit down with his new reporters and say, all right, here's a list of the stories that I don't want you to bring me. But through trial and error, and again, it's always, people can get you to do amazing things if they threaten to take the purse away from you. If they threaten to take the money away from you. If they threaten to take your, because they're not just taking your salary away, what are they taking away when they fire you? Why is it such a big threat? People are more scared of this on some levels than going to jail. At least you go to jail and you get out, you hopefully still have a job. Especially if you're a governor. What is the threat that corporations have by firing you? This is why they don't like unions. What are they taking away from you? It's not just your money. What are they taking from you?
Your ability to live.
And to achieve whatever version of the American dream you know, your house, your family. And the society loves this one. The society wants you, and this is conflict theory, this is general conflict theory, and I know a lot of people are not going to agree with this, and this is conflict perspective, playing devil's advocate here. Conflict theorists say society wants you to believe that you should get married, and that you should have kids, and that you should care about what happens in the future of your society. And you shouldn't rock the boat when you're standing in it with your newborn child in your arm, and your wife about to leave you, or your husband, because you keep screwing around and you get fired because you keep working for your principles. You know where principles get you? The homeless shelter. That's what conflict theorists would tell you. You go ahead, you operate on your principles, and you'll get fired, or you'll get thrown in jail. That's what they're trying to say. And that they want people to get married and have kids, because once you get married and have kids, are you going to rock the boat? Are you going to overthrow the government? Are you going to question the capitalist system? Are you going to question the dominance of institutions? Are you going to question your boss? Are you going to cause problems at work? You're not going to do any of those things. First of all, because you're too tired. If you've ever seen new parents, I do want to be honest, it shouldn't be any secret. I have no desire to. I was at Subway the other day. I thought, wow, this is the reason why I want to get a vasectomy right here. This poor guy had four kids with him, and they were just running all over the place, climbing up on stuff, opening the bathroom door, grabbing this bag of chips, putting this other one down, screaming, yelling. It's like, oh my gosh. You know, people say the difference when you're a kid. No, it's not. You just tolerate it more. They still drive you crazy. I don't know how many parents have got a splitting headache. I don't want a splitting headache. If kids mean a constant headache. And the bigger issue is, if you look at polling data, the media and society have done such a good job of convincing people that you should get married, buy a house, have kids, spend all your money on plastic garbage, destroy the environment with diapers. You ever seen what somebody's trash looks like the day after Christmas? If they have kids? My trash doesn't look like that. You better hope the earth isn't a living being, because it's going to want an explanation. Okay? But if you are a reporter and you're married and you got kids, you got a good career, and you go, you know what? I got evidence that President Bush lied about Iraq, he committed crimes, we're going to call for his impeachment, and the editor goes, sit down and shut the hell up before we all get fired. Okay? And what makes you think I agree with you? So there becomes this sense where, you know what, the first one or two times the reporter brings the story and the editor says, forget it, do you think the reporter's ever going to bring another story that's similar to that? So it kind of is a form of self-censorship, isn't it? It's not the government censoring people. It's the newspaper saying, the public might be interested in this story about Apple, but Apple's not interested in this story. And their company's worth hundreds of billions of dollars, and they give us hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising, and we're not going to throw mud at our friends. But the problem is, so what's the problem with that then? That seems pretty, you should be loyal to your friends, right? You should be loyal to, if you're a business and some other business helps you out, you shouldn't like stab them in the face or whistleblow on them. What's the problem, though, if the media doesn't report on Apple? What's that do for the public's perception? Do you think most people know how iPads are made? You think they'd like to know? You don't think they care? So the American people are just cold-hearted, insensitive pukes who don't care about the suffering of others? That's what you're trying to tell me?
I don't think it's that. I just think that, like...
Well, then why wouldn't you care about somebody being abused?
I mean, like, when I bought my iPad, I wasn't like, I wonder where this was made, and if, like, some slave made it in a sweatshop. Like,
But if you found that out, wouldn't that bother you?
Yeah, of course.
Would
but,
you
like,
give your iPad back?
No.
Are you now starting to see why other countries don't like Americans?
Absolutely, but I'm just saying I didn't, like, think about it.
I mean, if you're a Chinese employee, America's your enemy.
Yeah.
They're the ones driving this crap. The Chinese government's your enemy, and America's your enemy. And you got no friends. And you just sit in your room and you cry. Because you have to work 20 hours, or you jump out the window. I mean, these people are killing themselves. Even Walmart employees don't jump off the roof. And that's a terrible job. Right? You heard it first. Do something about it, Walmart. What are you going to do? Come and kill me? I got it on camera. America, Walmart just threatened my life. Anyway. Just kidding. I have to edit that out. Anyway. But again, Ben Bagdikian is accusing the news agencies of doing is distorting reality. And lying to people and manipulating people into positions that otherwise they wouldn't take if they had full information. Also, what you were just saying, I think it's maybe not a point of, like you said you weren't going to give your iPad back. I think maybe outside the United States that looks like insensitivity. But if you actually look deeper into the phenomenon, it's actually a sense I think that most Americans feel helpless in front of a monstrosity of a system. Well, who are you going to take on, Apple? I'm not completely convinced that Steve Jobs didn't try to kill people or had his own army. If he would have had one, he probably would have had. You guys underestimate this man. I don't think you understand who this person was. I really don't. You obviously, and I'll tell you right now, who you also don't know who this person is Mark Zuckerberg. I think you have no idea who this person is. I don't think he likes people at all. Do you get the impression Mark Zuckerberg is a human kind of person? He likes to hang out with strangers and, hey, you're on Facebook? Or did he just do this for the money and power?
But did you see the movie?
He's a narcissistic sicko.
Yeah.
Okay? He's a thief. He stabs his friends in the back. I mean, friends like that, who needs terrorists? You know? And I hope you know that he's stealing all your information. And he's selling it to companies. That's why you get all that. If you have a Facebook page, your spam folder is probably out of control. And even if it's not, he's selling it to other companies anyway. He's using that information. It's like Amazon. When you go on their site, they know what you bought, so they like suggest things for you. Okay? I'm telling you right now, these media conglomerates and these moguls, they're like, to me, like Robert Moses. He dealt with the public, but he hated the public. He absolutely hated the public. Do you guys know why there's no buses or trucks can go on the parkways? You know the real reason why that's the case? You know, have you ever seen trucks get stuck underneath these bridges? Do you know why? Not even buses can fit underneath these. You know why?
He didn't want them.
Because he didn't want bums from the city going out to Jones Beach and mucking it up with their scumminess. Seriously, I'm not joking.
That's reasonable, though.
That's not reasonable.
We want
What kind of class attitude is that?
Not a bunch of homeless people laying all over the beach?
I didn't say homeless people. I said that's his perception was that middle and lower class people were scums to him. Did I say homeless people? I'll rewind the tape.
I was a little nicer by saying homeless people.
There's bums in Congress. They make hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay? Anyway. All right. Let's go back to the functional views. We'll talk about this, and we'll get to symbolic interactions, and then I want to break down the book, and we're going to talk about what Noam Chomsky called the propaganda model, or how corporate influence and political influence filters information, particularly with regards to American foreign policy, to impact the public opinion, not only of the military, but of other countries and things like that. You can just look at it. One of the examples of this is the fact that how did both Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden were both friends of the United States at one point, and then all of a sudden they turned into the worst people in the world? How is that possible? Did all of a sudden their personalities change? Do you really think Bin Laden was different in 1993 than he is now, than he was, a couple of years, months ago?
No, human priorities changed.
What do you mean?
We didn't need them anymore.
So all of a sudden, then they should be the targets of our scorn and military attention, or were they used as scapegoats?
Why not both?
Huh?
Why not both?
Okay, that's a good point. Could be both. But again, we will talk about these elements of how this filtration system takes place and creates these perceptions. But back to the functionalist perspective. Functionalists, again, view this element of, they would challenge Bagdickian's idea and say, hey, there's no way even 5 or 6 companies can completely control information. And one of the things that functionalists would point to is the internet. That anybody, it used to be, if you wanted to put out a newspaper, you had to have a printing press. That was very expensive. You ever seen these things? They're like in warehouses. They're enormous. They cost tens of millions of dollars. They're expensive for the ink and the paper. And you have to have technicians to run them. In order to run a TV show, you had to have a TV station and cameras and broadcast license and all this other stuff. To run a radio show, you at least had to have a shortwave radio or something like that. What do you need now to run a blog or a video news program or put a news thing out there? What do you need now? That's it, right? Maybe a camera, right? And even my little netbook's got a camera on it. You can just sit there, hook it up to YouTube, and go, hey, this is what's going on. And that's how stories like, for example, Abu Ghraib broke like that. The pictures, the people who engaged in this behavior, I can't remember the name of the people who were involved in it. And they especially picked on that one woman who was pointing, right? Remember the genitals. And they had the hoods on them and electricity. They actually told them they were standing on a box, and they actually told them that it was electric wire on their fingers, and if there was water underground, if they stepped down, they'd be electrocuted. And then they piled them up. They made them strip down, and they piled them up in a pyramid. Those were personal pictures taken by the soldiers that got online, and somebody got a hold of. Also, even just regular, instead of not just regular people like you and I, who are not well known, but also remember, there's the smoking gun, there's the Drudge Report. Do people like, who's Julian Assange? Anybody know who this person is? WikiLeaks. This guy's like a criminal in the minds of many countries. He's releasing classified information from the government. From the war in Iraq and a whole bunch, not just the United States, but a lot of other places. So nowadays you can shake things up. You can't have this media monopoly that controls all information. Here's the thing, though. Bagdickian would fire back and say, you know what? Okay, maybe the internet was really free in 2003, 2004. What does YouTube have on its site that it didn't used to? That always annoyed me when I was watching it. Yeah. It's a corporate entity now. It's owned by Google, isn't it? Again, MySpace owned by Fox, and that's why nobody does it. Facebook's worth $100 billion, according to the market. How's he making all that money? I don't even understand why that kind of... Are there advertisements all over Facebook? Yeah, there you go, right? So you are still surrounded by the corporate reality, but here's the thing. If I put a controversial video up on YouTube and it goes viral, like Loose Change, is YouTube going to take it down just because it's controversial? Probably not. But a newspaper might refuse to print a letter to the editor or a story or whatever. It might try to censor it. Okay? But again, functionalists would say, look, the media is a needed institution, particularly in a mass democratic society where you have a system that depends on the free flow of information. You have people running for office. People need to know what's going on with the government. People need to know what the federal budget is, what are our priorities. So things need to be open, and again, you can't just have things like word of mouth spreading information. You need credible news agencies, right? So social order is a big thing, and actually being Bagdickian agrees with this point. Remember, he said that his weakness in the social order, newspapers should show that. What the criticism is here is that this all does is reinforce the status quo. Like, why were newspapers in the South saying that there's no racial issue, that there's no racial tension? And then, every once in a while, like 3 weeks later, a riot would break out. Why would they miss that? Because they don't want to tell people that kind of stuff. I'm surprised they reported on Occupy Wall Street. But if you actually look at it, were a lot of the stories about the Occupy Wall Street people positive? Did they make these people look like normal, good citizens, or like a bunch of kooks banging drums and doing drugs and dressing like hippies and not taking showers for weeks on end? And not having any ideas, and all. I mean, that's what was going on. You actually read the newspapers. Like, I read one newspaper, I think it was in the Post, that it was sort of about the Occupy Wall Street, but it was about supposedly some guy wandering around the park trying to sell coke. And they focused on that guy, right? Or that there was another guy who threatened a reporter, and then they focused on that guy. He tried to, like, he was going to hit her, right? And she was like one of these News 5 reporters. And if you've ever seen reporters the way they behave, don't some of them deserve to get hit? Your mother and father just burned up in the building. How do you feel? If you're going to cry, let's get a close-up. It's like Oprah. Tell me again how horrible that was for you. And off camera, she's going, this is great. Okay. Number 2, to entertain. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Number 3, to educate. Now, conflict theorists would say this is a form of indoctrination. For politically, culturally, socially. You're told, conflict theorists say, you're told lies. You're told lies about your country. You're told lies about how America began. Our founding fathers, if you look at them, were not the greatest people in the world. Thomas Jefferson wrote all men are created equal and he owned 200 people as property. And raped several of the slave women that were in his.
Back then, all men are created equal did not include black.
I don't think, if you actually read what the founding, they knew that this was wrong. They had that great compromise where they decided not to deal with the slavery issue.
As men, they thought of them as property. So all men are created equal did not include slaves.
I think you're absolutely wrong about this, because if people did, if a certain percentage of the population didn't think that slavery was wrong, then how did the abolition movement start? They were look, people in America were Christians. They read the book of Exodus. They knew slavery was wrong. They just chose to ignore it. And Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin and all these people, it wasn't just slavery. They were womanizing debaucherers. A lot of them, cheated at their finances. They did scurrilous things to common people. What I'm trying to say is, they weren't the most horrible people in the world, and they did have good intentions. But don't try to make these people out to be George Washington never tells a lie, and I chopped down the cherry tree, and that's stupid crap. That's crap. That's what conflict. Look, again, don't confuse what I'm saying for what I believe. That's what conflict theorists would say. How come people don't deal with the fact that Native Americans were deliberately infected with smallpox when the white settlers found out that they had no immunity toward it? That is absolutely horrendous, and that is not discussed one bit. The broken treaties, the lies that were told to Native Americans. There were something like 30 or 40 million Native Americans in the continental United States when colonists get here. There's only like 3 million in this country now or something. That's absurd. How come nobody talks about that? How come nobody talks about the empire building that the United States is engaged in? Why did we own the Philippines? Why do we have a naval base in Cuba? A hostile country to us. Why do we have 50,000 troops in South Korea? Why do we have army bases in 190 countries? Talk about that. That's not strategy. That's a waste of money. Uzbekistan is going to attack us?
North Korea would.
Oh, please. They would have already done it by now. You see the issue, though? You're believing the stuff they're saying. How do you know that the United States and other people didn't put this guy in North Korea in power just to scare people? Like a boogeyman. Like you pull him out of the closet to scare people. Right? That's what the Red Scare was about. That was a way to get rid of undesirable people by using a proxy attack on them by calling them communists. Half those people that were convicted, and some of them who were put in jail, were not even communists. McCarthy was outrageous. So we need to take a more measured view of some of these things, or at least a more realistic view. And from the conflict perspective, again, because I think, especially you are having an issue with this. This is not my beliefs, okay? So don't take what conflict theorists say as my beliefs, all right? But what I will do, because I want to be clear about this, conflict theorists are passionate about what they believe. And functionalists are too. So what I want to do is give weight to that passion. Okay? And if you don't think communists are passionate, get in a time machine and go back to China in 1948. Okay? Or go to Vietnam. Communists are passionate people. All right? Even though they're wrong. Or at least in the minds of many people, it's a broken system. Number 4, connection and integration. Again, functionalists would look at this as a positive thing. It's bringing people together. They experience things in a similar manner. Many people talk about where they were on 9/11, and that was a sort of unifying event. Also, you know, when Obama, not with bad things, but Obama was inaugurated, or trying to think of some other stuff. There have been positive. One of the things that the media does not focus on a lot. The newspaper's not really interested in positive stories for the most part. They're more likely to print a story where 5 children died in a house based on fire than if 5 people were saved by a fireman. So, number 5, disseminating cultural history and myths. That's similar to number 3. And again, conflict theorists would have an issue with that. Number 6, watchdog and alert system for dangers. Conflict theorists would say this leads the media, this thing here of telling people about swine flu or terrorism or hurricanes, natural disasters. How many people here think that the Weather Channel and the local news overblew the danger of Tropical Storm Irene? That was the one that was in August that knocked the power out to some people, like me, for 4 days. But that was the worst thing about it. I had my window open the whole time. Why do you think that they did that? The Weather Channel loves this crap.
Well, 1, for publicity, so more people watch their channel, and 2, possibly to boost the economy, because people ran out and bought like generators, flashlights.
Some people were crazy about it. Give me those batteries. I mean, they're just batteries. I'll tell you one thing it revealed. People on Long Island are absolutely unprepared. Absolutely. You didn't have flashlights at your house? Or candles? Or batteries? After 9/11? That nobody was prepared? And the stores were unprepared too, weren't they? Did you go down to buy the bottled water section? Did you see that one? At least I got bottled water for the next 10 years. Right? That's one good thing. Now everybody's prepared. I remember when I was a kid, and this is partly because of the Cold War, my grandma had like a year's worth of food and water down in her basement. And I remember, you know, as a kid, you're a kid, you're almost like a dog, just food, food. Right? So if you see, especially like candy or cereal. And I remember going down there and going, Grandma, can I have some of this food? She was like, no, that's for this and this. And as a kid, you don't understand that nuclear war could break out. I really don't think it would have helped. Her basement wasn't deep enough anyway. But conflict theorists would say that this is an attempt to cause social panic. That and conflict theorists would criticize even the war on terror. Said this. Yes, it's a serious issue, but it's not nearly as serious as the media has turned it into. And the proof is, how many attacks have we had since 9/11? How about 0? How many people have they arrested and brought out in public and shown to you that they're working and stopping these people besides the idiot shoe bomber guy? Remember the shoe bomber? How many terrorists have they dragged out in front of the public and executed? They say they've arrested people. I don't know. Again, I want to be clear, camera. This is not my view. But conflict theorists would take it that far. They would say the war on terror, the 9/11 attacks were used to increase the military's budget, to scare the hell out of people and get them to pass the Patriot Act and give unprecedented powers to the presidency, to start a false war in Iraq on false pretenses, and to keep the American people in such a state of panic that they would never vote for anybody else besides the person who was in power, which at the time was George Bush. Again, that's conflict theorist perspective. A lot of people think that's ridiculous conspiracy nonsense. Right? Although there's champions of it like Michael Moore and stuff like that. Okay. Symbolic interactionists view the media in a slightly different way. From a social psychological perspective, the media is used to develop a sense of individuality, identity, personal and group identity, and gives material for personality formation. Particularly the entertainment industry is designed to create styles and brands and trends that connect to people's personality. If you take a look at the perfect example of this, to some extent, if you've ever seen it, It's the scion. What's the scion? And why does it give people a false sense of individuality? Anybody own one? Right. Well, but what's one of the special features of this car?
No wheels.
All cars have wheels.
It's
Please raise your hand, okay, and make this relevant.
it's customizable.
Right. Why is that But here's the thing. There's only 10,000 ways to customize it. Are there more than 10,000 of these things on the road?
Probably.
So somebody's got a car that's just like yours. Is it really individuality to buy a car that everybody else has?
Buy the car and keep it stock. Of course, you gotta sell parts of it else.
But the point is, they're trying to sell you that this is unique, like a snowflake, when it's not. So they try to fool you into thinking that this is an expression of your personality. That you're the only one who has this, and therefore you're unique. When in reality, you're just joining a group. Just like people who put on the punk uniform with the leather jackets and the chains jingling. Each one of them has a different way of looking at that. Some of them got tattoos on their neck, other ones all the way up their arms. Some people wear a ripped leather jacket, or a jean jacket, or dirty clothes, or put paper clips in their ear. But it's all an expression of group identity. That this is who I am. And the symbolic interaction is to look at that aspect. That how do individuals use the media? How do small groups use the media? Okay? Please put the smartphones away.
Yeah, it's important, huh? It really is.
Just come and show me after class. Okay? You know the rules for the class. Theories connected to the social psychological impact of the media. Number one, role model theory. This is where the media provides role models for other people's behavior, both in how people talk, how they dress, potentially how they act. Some people have challenged this, say, come on, people don't actually learn how to act a particular way from the media itself. Number two, the interpretive model. This suggests that people, instead of just being sheep and following what the media says, that they take media material and they interpret it based on their own experiences, their own beliefs. For example, if you are an atheist, you're not going to watch the Christian Broadcast Network, and if you do, you're going to make fun of it instead of, it's not going to turn you Christian. Just like watching a show about murder is not going to make you into a murderer. Okay? Or even watching a show, even, like, for example, if you smoke, and you watch an anti-smoking program, it's not necessarily going to make you stop smoking. Although if it interacts with certain experiences that you've already had, maybe you coughed up blood last week. Now you're ready to listen. Okay? But it has to do with, there's a process by which information gets interpreted instead of just monkey see, monkey do. Number three, parasympathetic affinity and communication. This is the element of people connecting with other people in the media. For example, people who watch Oprah's show think that Oprah is their friend. She's part of their life. She's on, she's got a new network now, and she doesn't do the show the same way she used to. But when she used to do it on every day at the same time, for the same expanse of time, and I knew what to, if I was one of her fans, I knew what to expect. It was like a friend. It was like having a family member. And even on some levels, more reliable. Friends and family can get sick of you, or be busy, or whatever, or their relationships change with you. With Oprah, it's the same. Okay, every day she's there. It's like a reliable friend. And you trust her because her views match yours. And you do what she says because Oprah doesn't give you bad ideas because she's just like you. Or similar. Okay? That we sympathize with people, empathize with people, and develop an affinity with people who are similar to us. Number four, substitution theory. Media supplants time with family and friends. This is seen as a problem. This damages people's socialization. It damages people's ability to develop a mature personality. If all you do is spend, this is a theory, again, this is not my belief, that if you spend time with the media, and you're just feeding your mind in a pleasurable, hedonistic manner, you're never going to develop intellectually. And you're going to see things in good and bad, stark terms. You're going to let the media control your opinion of politics and a whole host of other issues. The media will drive consumer behavior. You'll probably most likely be more materialistic if you watch more media. There's actually studies that have been done on that. Number five, positivistic theories of the media. Media facilitates social network formation. that, especially with social media, the media has become a way, like for example, if you're a Russian immigrant to the United States, you can keep in contact with your family over the internet. You can do video chat. You can go to Facebook page. You can get a YouTube channel. You can talk to people. It's become a way to form social networks. Now, people have also criticized this and say that these people aren't really friends. They're not really close to you. They don't show any kind of real bond. You have friends online. They're not going to be able to pull you out of a lake if you're drowning because they're in Montana. Okay? They're not going to come to your birthday party because they're in another state. Maybe they don't even know you. Maybe you don't know them. Maybe they're stalking you and you don't even know it. You never know with, this is what critics would say, you never know with social media what the issue is. Number 1, formation of personal identity. Use of materials in popular culture to help to define each person's personality. Statements about my team or my music or my favorite star. It's my person. You hear a lot of people say this about Lady Gaga in 3 years. You won't even know who she is. She's not. Many people said, I could be wrong, but I don't think she's going to have the longest career as Madonna. And if you notice, Madonna's not really relevant anymore, is she? How many people bought her new album? You did? Number 2, and this is a big deal, safety valve for emotional release, like sports or entertainment, right? You had a rough day at work, or you get in an argument with your family, or just stressed, or just bored, that this can be a way to release those feelings. And there was actually an Israeli study done on domestic violence in the World Cup that said domestic violence went down during the World Cup. There was one article that was debunked at one point that connected murder rates to heavyweight prize fights. That the night after a prize fight, or the night of a major prize fight, the murder rate would jump. Suggesting that watching violence leads to violence. So, although, I'll tell you, it's probably not too far from reality, because I know a lot of people who watch boxing matches and then afterwards they start like shadow boxing and punching and pushing people, and it's like, man, you know, some critics would say that there's a sign of an emotionally immature person. That's what a 7-year-old does when they watch Mighty Morphin Power Rangers or something, right? Or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. Right? They start kicking the wall. Those of you who work in a daycare, you've seen this. Kids come in and kick stuff. Don't kick stuff, Billy. Why? Sometimes they hit other kids. Number 4, political, social, cultural socialization at the individual level. Wait, sorry. Back to number 3. Personality material. Again, we talked about that up here, and I mentioned it before. Again, socialization for the individual. Determining whether or not, are you a Republican or Democrat? Are you in favor of one position or another? What kind of music do you like? What kind of cultural aspects of America do you identify with? Things like the American dream. Aspects that talk to individuals about what their goals should be in society. Number 5, cultural capital. This is important, I think. For a lot of people to understand. How many people here are going to go into business? Nobody. How many people here are going to go work at like administration or a school or a hospital or something like that? Yeah. And I can almost assure you, most of these organizations, you're going to have to, if you're a woman, you're going to have to deal with a male boss, and if you're a male, you may have to deal with a female boss. And if your male boss loves sports and you hate him, and he comes in the morning and says, "Hey, did you see that game last night? Well, that was great." And you're at a meeting, and all the people who watch sports are like, "Yeah," and they start talking to him. What are they doing? Even though that's not work talk, what's going on there that you're losing out on? Raise your hand, Mark.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Socializing?
To some extent, and you're also drawing. You're developing an interpersonal relationship that's not just only based on work, but is based on interest, and it's kind of a form of like sucking up. Like, hey, the boss likes this, so. And some people will go out of their way to find out what their boss likes, and then start paying attention to, like, if they like soccer, they'll go out and golf or whatever it is. And particularly because men still dominate the upper echelons of executive power in this country. There's still only, I think, two female CEOs out of the top 500 companies in this country. The rest of them are male. Not that, most of them are white too. And if you don't know anything about sports or golf, you're going to be on the outside looking in, and you're not going to get promotions because of it. I mean, it sounds silly, but it's true. I'm telling you right now. And on the opposite side, if you have a female boss, And maybe she likes sports, or you don't, and you don't. Or maybe she likes a TV show or a movie, or likes a particular actor or actress, and likes to talk about it. You don't know anything about them. It's going to be a problem. All right. So before we get on to the Bing Bagdickian stuff, we want to look at some of the issues related to media and children. And this will feed both into our news discussion, because we'll talk about how news content, violent news content impacts children. But we'll also talk about it more specifically when we get to entertainment media. So some of the things that have been identified as effects of the media on children is what has been termed the mean and scary world syndrome. They actually found that children, particularly girls, are much more likely than adults to be portrayed as victims of violence on TV, and that this can make, especially young girls, but also young boys, make them more afraid of the world around them. And this is usually, here's an issue of parental behavior reinforcing or exacerbating children's fear. So children watch the news with their parents, and this probably happens less. This happened more when I was a kid, when there was no cable and kids didn't have TVs in their room. But let's say that the kid sits down with, it's just in the room when the parent is watching news and they see some story about a 5-year-old being kidnapped and raped and murdered. The guys are looking at me like, why would a parent let a child watch that?
To teach them to be careful.
Right, and then, but then before they go to the bus stop, then the parent piles on and goes, "Now, Billy, there's a lot of weirdos out there. Don't talk to any of them. Don't take candy from anybody." And what's somewhat wrong-headed about that is that who's most likely to kidnap a child?
Somebody they know.
Go ahead. Right, parent. Actually, most of the times it's a disgruntled parent. Right? It's really strange. But does that come across in the news? What stories do they like to talk about?
The gruesome ones.
Right.
Like
The stranger danger. Yeah, the Polly Klaas case in or like the Carly Brucey case where this young, did I tell you about this case? On Super Bowl weekend in 2004, this young woman was walking home to her house. She went through the parking lot of a car wash. This is stuff that wakes parents up in the middle of the night. This is why they tell kids this scary crap. And I love it though. Parents will also say there's no boogeyman and then describe the boogeyman, the real boogeyman. But this young woman was walking home, and this handyman who had worked around her house, so she sort of knew this person in passing. She was walking through, and there was a camera there at the car wash. And he was kind of a drifter, and he had a criminal record and all kinds of stuff. You see him in the camera, he comes up to her and says something to her, and then within a split second, he just grabs her hand and just yanks her like that, and just pulls her away, and he raped and killed her. And what's worse of all, what came out, was that the police had found him 2 weeks earlier, passed out in his car with cocaine in his car, and he was on probation. And they sent him back to jail. You know, and it's those kinds of cases that make parents wake up in the middle of the night with cold sweat dripping down their face. That's why there's the Amber Alert system. They normally don't they will do it, but that's more for the stranger danger stuff. Someone gets kidnapped at a mall. They normally don't put kids up there who are kidnapped by parents or an adopted parent or something like that. Right? So it's kind of odd. But the press likes to deal in that. So that frightens children. And it leads them to think that the world is more dangerous than it actually is. And that crime is much more prevalent. And one of the things that they found out, for parents who watch a lot of news, they tend to overestimate the amount of crime, and then they project that on their children. And then second of all, they tend to support harsher punishments for crime in general. People who watch more television news tend to support the death penalty at a higher level. They tend to support the expansion of the death penalty, which a lot of people are in favor of, especially like some people are in favor of expanding, conflict theorists would be in favor of expanding the death penalty, people like Bernie Madoff. That conflict theorists say, you execute a few of these AIG executives for embezzling $60 million, and embezzlement's going to go way down in this country. That's actually what they do in China. You embezzle money, they'll kill you. I don't know if they still, the United States used to execute people in public to send a message. There's still countries that do that. Saudi Arabia does that. They take them out to soccer fields, cut their heads off. So, and they do that to send a message to people. There's been attempts in this country to show you how the media loves violence. There's been attempts in this country to televise executions. They want pay-per-view, like Shock TV or something, like just watch somebody have convulsions. And if you've ever even seen somebody dramatized being killed in an electric chair, it's ugly. They froth at the mouth, smoke comes off their head, they shake and convulse. It's pretty nasty, you know. Crap themselves. I mean, when you kill somebody, it's ugly. You know, people think it's like some kind of clean process. Now that most of the time they use lethal injection, but even in Texas, hanging is still a viable option. You can request to be hanged in Texas. I'm not kidding you. And if there's 2 witnesses to a murder, you don't get an appeal. Are you from Texas? Is that a big topic of conversation, or are most people just in favor of, hey, we got the best laws in the country?
They're mostly like that. I mean, there's
Pretty conservative, except for maybe Austin.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm from Houston.
Well, you know that UT Austin is somewhat of a liberal. San Antonio is somewhat liberal too, but not. Yeah. Houston particularly, right? That's the good old boys with the pickup trucks, and they're not putting up with crap.
Pretty much.
So. Do they? Some people put Confederate flags in their? Stuff? Which is funny because Texas was technically.
They were.
Right. It was its own country for a while. So, yeah. Anyway, desensitization to real-life violence as well occurs. Some of the most violent TV shows are children's cartoons in which violence is portrayed as humorous. This was a concern. You still see this to this day. On Jackass, what do they say at the beginning of Jackass? And they used to do this in Beavis and Butthead too. And South Park as well. What do they say at the beginning of these cartoons? Which are not, and Jackass isn't a cartoon, which are not for children. Yes, tell me your name again, I'm sorry.
Amanda.
Go ahead, Amanda.
That you shouldn't try any of it. It's all professionals and they won't give you like any submissions.
Right, like if you do this, you can't sue us. It's essentially a legal liability thing. And one of the reasons why they started this, everybody know what Beavis and Butthead was? Yeah. Right, it was like the original sort of like disgusting it was one of the original these disgusting cartoons. It's actually done by the same guy who does King of the Hill, Mike Judge. And what happened one day, they had an episode called Frog Baseball, where they were playing baseball with a frog. I know. There was one that was hilarious. They got a hold of a chainsaw, and they went around knocking things, like chopping telephone poles down and all this other stuff. And at one point, Butthead holds up a cricket, and they said they were going to circumcise him. And so Beavis goes over his finger with the chain and chops his finger completely off. I mean, it's really, but it's supposed to be from a young adult audience, or even an older adult audience. You know, I want to say Patrick Swayze or Patrick Stewart one time said he loved Beavis and Butthead. He's a 60-some-year-old man from England who does classical Shakespeare acting. But again, they were playing frog baseball, and they showed one of them hitting the frog with the baseball bat, and then I think a 6 or 7-year-old child picked up a baseball bat and hit his brother in the head with it. And they blamed Beavis and Butthead for that. And I don't think they were successful in any lawsuits, or I'm not even sure if they filed. I'll look up the case, because I think it's important for us to examine this. So we'll examine it in the second section when we get to the dangers of television entertainment programs. But after that, that warning was put on there. And it even says stuff like, Beavis and Butthead are not real, they're fictional. And the things they do can cause you to be expelled or arrested or even deported. So please don't try this at home. And they're sort of tongue-in-cheek making fun of that. Sort of winking like Jackass does. Don't do this at home, kids. And there was a kid who tried to jump a car or moving car with a skateboard, and he flipped over and died. Or I don't know if it was a moving car. But he tried one of those tricks on Jackass where they jumped a car with a skateboard, and the edge of the skateboard caught the top of the car, and this kid fell and died. Right? And that frightens a lot of people. And again, it's similar with violence. That if you portray things in a funny manner, potentially there's a potential for people to get hurt. And there's some evidence that shows that. The second aspect here, increased aggressive behaviors, just related to these aspects here. This can be especially true of young children who are more likely to exhibit aggressive behavior after viewing violent TV shows or movies. Parents should also pay close attention to what their children see in the news. Again, we've talked about that before. Fear based on real news events increases as children get older and are better able to distinguish fantasy from reality. So actually, as people get older and they start to realize what crime is about, it starts to become a more serious issue. When you're 6 and 7, you don't understand murder the same way. Although, I remember my parents, I don't know why this occurred, and some people would look at this almost as a form of, maybe not child abuse, but negative or bad parenting. They let me watch Jaws when I was 6. And I remember having a nightmare for weeks, and the carpet was blue in my room, so I thought it was water. And I wouldn't let my feet dangle down because I thought sharks were, you know, I mean, when you're a kid, you're delusional. When you're a kid, you can make think the floor is lava and you're jumping on the couch to get away from it. I mean, that's the type of stuff that kids do. You know, kids have imaginary friends, you know, all kinds of things that kids do. So kids have an active imagination, and the television sometimes spurs that to what some people will call negative perspectives. Effects on, also here are some more effects on children's development, not just about the content itself, but about the act of watching television. Television can affect learning and school performance if it cuts into time kids need for activities crucial to healthy mental and physical development. Most of children's free time, especially during the early formative years, should be spent in activities such as playing, reading, exploring nature, learning about music, or participating in sports, or at the very minimum a diverse, not just watching television, but a combination of some of these other more outdoor activities. TV viewing is a sedentary activity and has been proven to be a significant factor in childhood obesity. According to the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Canada, almost 1 in 4, I couldn't find any information on American children, probably, again, because they don't want to talk about this. You know? But if you ever watch cartoons or kids shows, McDonald's advertises, Skittles advertises, Doritos advertises. There's no broccoli commercials going on during Transformers or something like that. And again, if you look at a lot of these, especially Cartoon Network, most of those cartoons are adult. People get killed in these cartoons. You ever seen the Star Wars Clone Wars? People get killed left and right in there. People get stabbed with lightsabers, all kinds of weird stuff. It's not for kids. The kids don't know the difference, and parents sometimes don't know the difference either. Although I remember one time when I was in Alaska, I was briefly renting a room at this one woman's house, and she wouldn't let her kids watch The Simpsons. But when I was there, she did. They loved it. Everything was great. This is what, because they knew it was forbidden. Anyway, but back to the report. Almost 1 in 4 Canadian children between 7 and 12 is obese. Time spent in front of the TV is often at the expense of more active pastimes. A Scientific American article entitled "Television Addiction" examined why children and adults find it hard to turn their TVs off. According to researchers, viewers feel an instant sense of relaxation when they start to watch TV. That's actually what heroin addicts report. Some drug addicts will tell you, and I know because I've studied this, they'll tell you that even just having the drug in their hand is enough to relax them. The anticipation of getting the drug in their body is enough. Like when they score, that's enough. They're fine, and then eventually, because they're going to get the drug in their body. But I'm telling you right now, heroin addicts report this, alcoholics report this. Even one drink, it's like a psychosomatic thing. It's like a psychological thing where it makes people calm. Other people with things like shopping and stuff like that. So anyway. While people generally feel more energized after playing sports or engaging in hobbies, actually it's been shown that exercise increases your immune system. Television doesn't. After watching TV, they usually feel depleted of energy. According to the article, this is the irony of TV. People watch a great deal longer than they plan to, even though prolonged viewing is less than rewarding. How many people here have found it hard to turn the TV off, either before you've gone to bed, or because you're supposed to do homework or something? You can admit it. I'm not trying to judge you, right? So there are issues with it. Right? My stepdad couldn't fall asleep unless the TV was on. And as soon as you turn it off, he'd wake up. You go turn that back on. It's like, dude, you were sleeping for 3 hours. I heard you snoring. Especially if it was a NASCAR race. If I wanted to turn it to a football game. Oh my God, I got him like that. You know? Although a NASCAR race is so long, you could sleep an entire sleep cycle by the time one's. Some of them take 5-6 hours. Anyway, as well as encouraging sedentary lifestyle, television can also contribute to childhood obesity by aggressively marketing junk food to young audiences. According to the Canadian Pediatric Study, you got to ask yourself why Americans have not done more research on this. Conflict theorists would say they don't want you to know what's going on. You know, and I think most Americans, it's like they say if you like sausages and lolls, you shouldn't watch either one of them being made. Trust me. Let me put it this way. If you like fast food, you shouldn't want to go behind the doors of McDonald's to see what's going on and where that food comes from. I remember watching people drop things on the floor, put them right back in the box, frozen box. All kinds of like grease all over stuff. Dust on things. It's really nasty. And sausage is even worse. Okay? Or anybody ever been to a slaughterhouse? You want to see how steaks are made? It's ugly. Probably make you sick. You know, it was way worse in the past. In the past, they'd be knee deep in blood and guts and stuff. You've ever read up to Sinclair's book, The Jungle. But again, I don't think most Americans want to know how much money these junk food companies are spending attracting your children. Look at McDonald's. McDonald's is probably the expert at it. They not only have Ronald McDonald, they got the kids' meals with the little toys in them. And what are the toys usually from? Yeah, Disney movies too, usually, right? Many times. Or Transformers or something, right? Or Shrek. So they got them tied all in. And plus, McDonald's is also tied into Coca-Cola. That's one of their corporate partners too. They are expert at sucking children in. How many people here, when you were under the age of 10, you went to McDonald's? How many people here, you liked McDonald's? You had positive feelings about it. How many people have positive feelings now about McDonald's? Poor McDonald's. I hope they see this. There you go, Hamburger University. Put that one in your profit folder. How many people here, even though you don't have a good impression of them, you still eat them? The dollar menu, right? You can't beat the dollar menu, can you? Although it's not a dollar menu anymore, is it? It's like a $1.28 menu. It's inflation. I went to Subway the other day and the prices went up. I mean, it's inflation stuff. Really bad. I was going to say something else. But anyway, commercials for healthy food make up only 4% of those shows. I'm surprised to see 4%. A lot of money goes into marketing ads that are successful in influencing consumer behavior. McDonald's, the largest food advertiser on TV, reportedly spent $500 million on "We'd Love to See You Smile" ad campaign. I'm sure clothing companies like McDonald's, because once you start eating their food long enough, you need new clothes. I doubt your gloves and shoes would even fit at that point in time. So, anyway. Bill Cosby once said he knows how he was gaining weight as he would get out of the shower, water would pour out of his belly button. So, anyway. Try that for a mental image. Kids today are bombarded with here's sexual content, sexual messages and images in all media. Television, magazines, advertisement, music, movies, and the internet. Parents are often concerned about whether these messages are healthy, why television can be a powerful tool for educating young people about the responsibilities and risks of sexual behavior. Such issues are seldom mentioned or dealt with in a meaningful way in programs containing sexual content. To prove this, there are shows like Dawson's Creek. If you've ever seen, I don't think it's on the air anymore. I don't even think the network's on the air anymore, is it? Is there just Pix 9 or something? There's no WB anymore, right? Right? And it was Paramount and WB got together. I think that's what happened. There was the Paramount Network and the WB Network, and they were both kind of like lagging behind the other major networks, so I think they teamed up. WB at one point had, isn't that the one that had Seventh Heaven on it, right? And that's Jessica Biel was on that one. That was sort of a wholesome show. They didn't really deal with sex straight on. But like Dawson's Creek, can anybody watch this? You can admit it. What was some of the content on there about sex? Was it portrayed in a responsible manner, or kind of a, ooh, this is naughty and it's fun?
It was PG though.
Okay. But didn't one of the characters have sex with one of his teachers?
Yeah.
And they talked about sex like it was just currency, like this is just what people talk about, right? Like talking about virginity and how stupid it was, right? Or shows like The 40-Year-Old Virgin. 12-year-olds watch that. Do you think they want to be the 40-year-old virgin? And look, do you think what's the view of high schoolers and virginity? That it's cool? I loved it when, you remember Brittany took she took an abstinence pledge at one point. And she ended up marrying Kevin Federline. Didn't the Jonas Brothers, don't they have these little rings? And Russell Brand was making fun of them. Do you guys remember this? At the, I don't remember what award show it was. Russell Brand got on stage and said, after they won the award, he's like, I can't believe you guys have these celibacy rings, or whatever they are. And one of them's actually married, one of the Jonas Brothers. Anyway, and he goes, you're the Jonas Brothers, you should be having sex with as many people as you can. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but he essentially was suggesting, you guys are weak and stupid and you're nerds because you're not sticking your penis in somebody. Be vulgar, but that's essentially, and Russell Brand, he's a real responsible adult, right? That's why Katy Perry's still married to him. Not. Anyway. Also shows like Sex and the City. Here's the thing, parents will tell you things like, well, this isn't meant for kids. But kids are attracted to these types of shows. You telling me that no 12-year-old has ever seen Entourage? They've never seen the show Weeds? They've never seen Sex and the City, the movie? Wasn't Miley Cyrus in the second Sex and the City movie? I swear she was. That grabbed, what they wanted to do was pull the tweens in. We'll get the 14-year-olds. Was that R-rated? Huh? No. I just heard about it. I don't watch shows like that. I got better things to do, like stare at the wall. Here's my problem with the movie industry. It's not the $10. It's the 2 hours. I got work to do. I don't have 2 hours to sit around in a crappy movie. And it would upset me to have to leave halfway through the movie, but I would do it. The only reason why, versus a play where I would stay to boo and throw things, or something like that. I mean, you're going to be crappy on stage. You are risking danger.
You gotta have a shorter movie.
Well, I would rather not have the ordeal. Frankly, the best thing for me is probably just to get a Netflix account. That way I can watch the movie, and like you can get unlimited movies for a certain price, and that way if it's crappy, just turn it off. But the ordeal of going to the movie, in the movies it's like a middle school playground. Every time I go in there, it's nothing but 14-year-olds, 12, 13-year-olds. And not that that's a problem. If I was 13, it would be a big deal, but kids of that age are kind of rambunctious.
Don't put a PG-13 movies to the hall.
They're in the lobby, Anyway, and I also don't like the fact you can't bring in outside food. That's absolute nonsense. I'm not paying $5 for a Coke. And I'm not paying $7 for crappy popcorn that costs 10 cents. I mean, that's absurd. And I love it during the winter, though, because I bring my coat and I'll pack it full of stuff. The movies, just like the amusement parks, force people into doing that. I have a monumental amount of respect for Major League Baseball, because guess what they let you do? You can bring your own food in. Can you bring your own beer in?
No, you can't bring anything.
No. I thought it was a bottle. You couldn't bring a bottle.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
At least you can bring
bottle.
food, though. I mean, good God. I'm not paying $9 for pig shoulders and pig ears and a hot dog or whatever they put in hot dogs. It's not good meat, or it wouldn't be in a hot dog. If it was good meat, it'd be in the steak container. I'm serious. But according to a study from the Kaiser Family Foundation in 2001, and they looked at sex on TV, but they looked at things like Sex and the City. It says 3 out of 4 primetime shows contain sexual references. Situation comedies top the list. You ever watch Big Bang Theory? First of all, it's called Big Bang Theory. They talk about disgusting stuff on that show. Licking stuff, grabbing things, touching things. There was one episode, one of the characters, Wolowitz, had a robot arm, and he was using it to masturbate, and it got stuck on him, and he had to go to the hospital. That's on at 8 o'clock at night. Remember old shows like Married with Children? That was filled with sexuality and cleavage and sexual suggestion and all kinds of things like that, right? Although, I will defend Big Bang Theory. They do talk about condoms on that show. That's the one positive thing. But here's the thing they don't. They just, I was watching a rerun of an episode on TBS last night, and one of the characters, those of you know the show, there's a character named Wolowitz and a character named Bernadette, and they're dating, and this was the one where they had been on a third date. And Bernadette says to him, well, that's traditionally where you have sex. By what standard? In Los Angeles? Is that the standard? Yeah, I need to move to Los Angeles or something. I mean, that's what some people might say. Okay, I'm not interested in this nonsense. But again, why is the television and the writers projecting their standards onto other people's behavior? How many people agree that's the standard? 3 dates and sex. 5? See, I mean, and what are 12-year-olds going to think? I mean, not that they're going to go, oh, wow, that's the rule. But that gives them the idea that, first, that sex is cool and fun, and it's like a plaything. And 2, it's real easy to, get to. All you have to do is just wait out 3 dates, and you're there. And then if you don't, you're an enormous loser, right? Because the characters on that show are nerds. And one of the running jokes about it, like particularly the Leonard character, who's about this tall, who wants the hot blonde across the hallway, her name is Kaylee Cuoco. And his Wolowitz in particular constantly tormenting him about the fact that he's such a nerd and he can't have sex and all this other stuff. One of the first episodes, when Kaylee moved in, her name is Penny on the show, Wolowitz and Sheldon, the 2 characters that live in the room live in an apartment across the hall, looked across and he said, Leonard said, our children will be smart and beautiful. And Sheldon, his friend, goes, yeah, not to mention imaginary. Right? Anyway, situation comedies top the list. 84% contain sexual content. Of the shows with sexual content, only 1 in 10 include references on safe sex or the possible risks or responsibilities of sex. And shows that portrayed teens in sexual situations, only 17% contain messages about safe and responsible sex. On Sex and the City, they have discussion. Did any of the characters get herpes? They would in real life. What's the one Kim Cattrall plays? She'd had super herpes. She'd had herpes mixed with gonorrhea. I mean, that woman has sex with everybody, doesn't she? Isn't that sort of the running joke on the show, that she like has sex with elevator operators and back alleys and all kind of... I mean, what kind of a message? But having said that, media partly is about portrayal. Do they portray her in a positive light, though? Or do her friends think she's a joke? Go ahead, Mark.
She's seen as a positive.
But among the, whatever, 3 or 4 friends, she's the worst. She's portrayed sort of as the loosest and most ridiculous one of them all. Whereas what's the one who constantly tries to get married? The one with black hair or brown hair? Right. Right. And she's on some level just as shallow as the rest of them, isn't she? They portray her as a gold digger, don't they? No?
No,
She just wants to get married.
yeah.
Okay. Anyway, all right. All right, we're running a little on time here. All right, so here are some of the debates about the media. We'll get to that later here. I want to talk about this here. This is related to the new media monopoly. Now, again, we'll get back to the book next time, and then we'll talk about the propaganda model. Right here, is it 12:05? All right, the mainstream media uses cinematic or dramatic techniques to create maximum emotional impact on the viewer. The news does this too. Number 1, they use strong and graphic images. This is online, so you don't have to write this all down. Use of graphic and emotive language. The media likes to personalize things. So if they're talking about the recession, they talk about one person or a set of people or a community. And they do similar things with murder and things like that, or crime. They don't... When is the last time you saw a news program that talked about the rate of crime or the rate of murder? For example, if you just watch the news, would you think the crime rate and the murder rate in New York is going up or going down? What is it really doing? Yeah, it's actually dropped by 45% from the 1970s, where there were like 2,200 murders a year in the 5 boroughs. Now there's like 12 or 1,300, which is still, I mean, that's like 3 a day. Okay, that's pretty nasty. By the way, did you see, and I'm sure a lot of you will take notice of this, New York was just voted the rudest city in America. After number 2 is Miami. I love that. You don't think that people that live in that kind of weather would be all grumpy and nasty or something like that. So, but 3 is Los Angeles. And Los Angeles for the past 5 years have been the number 1 city. So I would like to say to the people of Los Angeles, well, all of a sudden you get nice now? I don't know what, I would love to see what characteristics they use to explain that. But anyway, but stories like that come out. They love those types of stories because it plays with, the media loves to deal with stereotypes, and this is part of what they're doing here. They're playing on what you think crime is like, what the personal aspects of crime is. Number 3, use of music to set the tone or mood of the media content. Number 4, repetition. How many times they show that 9/11 thing, right? How many times they show the terrorist faces on TV? They want you strongly, things that the media wants you to believe, particularly the news media, they want you strongly to associate things. You know, the presidency with honor, which is very hard. Terrorists with, you know, you're evil. You know, North Korea and Iraq and Iran as the axis of evil. Those types of things. They want these deep connections to occur, and they do that by repetition. Number 5, prominence, importance of the piece, lead-in news reports, or a number 1 movie or TV show. All right, now, make sure to read Chapter 2. And again, we'll go over, we didn't have time today, we'll go over the Chomsky propaganda model and some of the stuff that Bagdikian, some of the evidence he uses in his book. All right, everybody, have a good weekend. Look at it. They would also look at religious ideas of good and evil. These things are meaningless now. A lot of postmodernists are atheists. They believe religion is just a way to manipulate the masses the way Marx did. Marx called religion the opiate of the masses. Anyway, also things like rationality, structuralism to explain and control problems. Increasing social chaos is what postmodernists see for the future, and constant cultural change. This leads to an anime or the feeling of helplessness and hopelessness, that you're just a boat lost in the storm. You can't change what your government's going to do. You can't stop the national debt. You can't stop the housing crisis. If they call you off to war, you're going to have to go. Some terrorist wants to kill you. It's going to happen. I mean, look, we went in 1950. If you would have said to somebody, you know what, in 2001, 19 morons are going to hijack 4 planes and run them into buildings, you'd have been like, what? Why would somebody do that? Right? That wouldn't be even something that somebody conceived of. Although they did drop nuclear weapons on people. Anyway, that they could conceive of. It's also a crisis of legitimation. The government's lost its credibility. Corporations have lost their credibility. Religion? Has it lost its credibility? I seem to remember some scandal with some churches, not just the Catholic Church, but the Protestant Church, something about the kids. Maybe I was confused that with Penn State. Anyway. Hey, when you harbor a child molester for 14 years, you don't have any defense.